It's 5:06 and welcome into a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, the calendar this morning, it reads September the 26th, the one day, tomorrow, and 1 year ago, it was a Friday, September the 27th, 2024. That's when the center of Hurricane Helene crossed the South Carolina-North Carolina line around 8 a.m. As you are well aware in our coverage over the last year, it brought widespread destruction to portions of upstate South Carolina and the mountains of western North Carolina, causing flooding, landslides, and hurricane-force wind gusts, leaving unimaginable devastation and destruction in its wake. This is one of the setups that made this storm even more deadly than it should have been. Heavy rain had already fallen across western North Carolina in the days and weeks beforehand, priming the mountains and saturating the tree roots and the ground for catastrophic flooding. And so when Helene hit, dumping, while it was a record amount of rain, the saturated ground just couldn't take any more, and many trees in the western half of the state tipped over like twigs. It was not much to push them over due to the ground being so saturated. The storm was the deadliest Atlantic hurricane since Maria back in 2017 and the deadliest to strike the United States mainland since Katrina in 2005. According to the National Hurricane Center, they're based out of Miami, Florida. North Carolina recorded 107 fatalities, 86 directly from the storm, and 21 indirect from things like medical emergencies, car crashes, and post-storm cleanup. 86 individuals dying directly from Helene. That record of deaths in North Carolina, 107, making it, from at least a record-keeping standpoint, the deadliest storm in North Carolina history. And damage, well, unfortunately, it was everywhere. Homes, businesses, hospitals, schools leveled, destroyed, literally in some cases washed away as landslides and historic flooding took out major roads and highways. We all saw the video and pictures of Interstate 40 literally falling apart in the western half of North Carolina. Bridges destroyed as well. The electrical grid completely ripped out of certain areas of western North Carolina. Cellular systems, water treatment facilities, many of them heavily damaged, or in some cases completely destroyed. And as we have looked at the recovery over the last 12 months, Helene now ranks as the fifth costliest Atlantic hurricane on record, behind only Katrina, Harvey, Ian, and Maria. Those are all obviously storms that have affected the United States, I should say, over the last 20 years or so, and it is unfortunate to see so much of the devastation and destruction. Estimates still hanging in the ballpark of around $60 billion for Helene just in western North Carolina. That does not include the impacts of the Florida area, the Big Bend area of Florida where the storm made landfall, and the devastation left in portions of Georgia and South Carolina. That $60 billion total, just the state of North Carolina. The National Hurricane Center report on Hurricane Helene paints a devastating picture for western North Carolina, as they have done a really good job in the last year, and as you would expect them to do research and provide historical data and accounts of that storm. The North Carolina Forest Service estimating more than 800,000 acres of timberland were lost, and $214 million was done in damage to the forests alone. Buncombe County, which hosts the city of Asheville, was hit especially hard and received a lot of major national media attention due to the fact that Asheville is the largest city in western North Carolina. The city of Asheville and Buncombe dealt with flash flooding, river flooding, and landslides. 37 people died in Buncombe County, one of the largest populations of death anywhere from Helene. 16 died in landslides around Fairview, in Swannanoa and Black Mountain. 9 drowned in raging floodwaters of the Swannanoa River, and 6 lives were lost immediately in the city of Asheville, with more fatalities. But as there was so much devastation and destruction, it's really hard to pin down exactly, unfortunately, where some of those individuals lost their lives. More than 500 water rescues took place just across Buncombe County alone as historic river flooding devastated Asheville's low-lying areas. The Biltmore Village was submerged or in some cases literally swept away. The River Arts District was largely destroyed, and flooding also struck Bernardsville along the Ivy River and areas near the Broad River in the southeastern portion of the county. In all, at least 300 landslides were reported in portions of western North Carolina, many of them in Buncombe County, that led to so much of that devastation and destruction. Helene crippled Asheville's water system, and clean water wasn't restored until weeks after the storm. You had to head over to mid to late November of last year before there was some semblance of normalcy with running water in the city of Asheville, in and around Buncombe County. In some cases, it took more than 2 months immediately after the storm to get water back to some municipal customers. Power was out for the vast majority of the state, with electrical crews estimating it would take months to get power restored. Fortunately, while the devastation and destruction was quite severe, as you are well familiar with at this point, crews were able to work a lot quicker than some of the early estimates, which indicated that power could be out for some folks 8, 9, 10 months due to the fact that they would have to restring potentially dozens, if not hundreds of miles worth of high-tension electrical cables that were either taken down by trees falling in the mountains of North Carolina, or in some cases, there was just no poles left at all. They were swept away and pushed downriver by the massive amount of flooding. Tens of thousands of trees were knocked down, many of them destroying homes across the western half of the state. And in all, more than 560 structures were destroyed, with at least 900 sustaining major damage, with nearly 9,000 or so we're still kind of waiting to see exactly what some of those numbers look like as we now sit here almost 1 year ago since Hurricane Helene. And the rainfall totals, irregardless of some of the flooding and some of the wet weather that existed in western North Carolina before Helene, take a listen to some of these rainfall totals. In Yancey County, they reported 30.7 inches of rain from Helene. Transylvania County, 29.98. Mitchell County, 23.31. Avery County, almost 23 inches of rain there as well. As those numbers continue, massive amounts of rainfall. The peak wind gust from this storm in North Carolina was 106 miles an hour. That was at Mount Mitchell in Yancey County. I'll note Mount Mitchell is an incredibly high point. It is one of the tallest points east of the Mississippi, so no surprise that reported such a hefty wind gust, but 106 miles an hour there. Banner Elk in Watauga County also reported a record wind gust of 101 miles an hour, so those winds were felt both high and low. As we sit here on this 1 year mark, it was September the 27th, 2024, when Helene was getting ready to impend so much damage and destruction on the western half of our state. The North Carolina General Assembly did meet this week, a House Oversight Committee hearing dealing with some of the recovery, the cleanup, and restoration efforts that have been ongoing over the last 12 months. We'll get into some of those details as we roll through the program this morning, right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:15, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will head on over to the traffic center on your early Friday morning commute and get an update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good Friday morning. The week.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. As we look at 1 year ago, Hurricane Helene getting ready to create so much devastation and destruction across the western half of North Carolina, we do need to keep a current eye on the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. The basin, the Atlantic basin, really heating up over the last couple of days, and we've got multiple systems that we are tracking this morning. Hurricane Humberto is still forming and is now fully a hurricane. It was a tropical storm yesterday morning when we talked about it. And that storm currently is sitting just north of the Lesser Antilles, and it is expected to recurve before it hits the United States, coming potentially pretty close to Bermuda, but looks to split the gap between Bermuda and the continental United States. That is a storm that we are keeping an eye on. However, this other area, you've been hearing about it and likely seeing social media posts about it. Invest 94L. This is a low-pressure system that is currently working its way off of Hispaniola that is set to potentially develop. Strong likelihood of development, according to the National Hurricane Center, out of their 4 a.m. advisory this morning, so just about an hour or so ago. They say that this system has an 80% chance of development in the next 48 hours. And with that, forecast models have been seemingly very consistent over the last day or so. Both the major European and GFS U.S. model for this system show some sort of tropical feature making its impacts between the North and South Carolina coast coming up very early next week, Monday, late afternoon and evening into the early hours of Tuesday morning. Fortunately, due to its close proximity to the United States before it develops, it is not expected to become a major hurricane. However, it could very easily be a very strong tropical storm or even a Category 1, weak Category 2 storm, as it will shoot out of that area in the tropics in the next 24 to 48 hours. That is something that we are keeping an eye on and will do so throughout the weekend as folks across the North and South Carolina coast should make sure that they've got their hurricane prep kit in place if this storm does materialize and does cause some level of damage, as it is expected to, again, impact the coast of these two states sometime late in the day on Monday through the day on Tuesday. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 524, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. As we look back 12 months ago, Tropical Storm and Hurricane Helene left unimaginable devastation across the western half of North Carolina. And over the last 12 months, we have seen a lot of progress in many areas, billions of dollars flowing in from both federal and state governments. There was a meeting in the North Carolina General Assembly this week looking at how some of that progress is ongoing, a joint legislative government operations meeting dealing with Hurricane Helene recovery. To walk us through some of the details from that committee meeting, Teresa Opeka, CarolinaJournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Teresa, it's almost remarkable to say it was 1 year ago, but it was, and work continues across western North Carolina.
Yes, good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me. So yeah, it's hard to believe it's been a whole year since Hurricane Helene hit western North Carolina and devastated many communities. I believe about 108 people lost their lives. It was just truly a devastating time for the state. And we did have a Hurricane Helene, it was actually, shouldn't say a Hurricane Helene, Joint Legislative Government Ops Subcommittee hearing on how things are progressing with Hurricane Helene recovery in western North Carolina. There was one thing that all officials came to a consensus about at that hearing, is that FEMA's bureaucracy has been a hindrance and not a help. That was the one standard message across county officials, state officials. It just has not been they have not been a big help. There's more, you hear about red tape. There's been more layers of red tape being added, and that's not helping the people who desperately need it out there.
Obviously, Teresa, it's a sad thing to hear, but I'm not going to sit here this morning and tell you that I'm shocked to hear it. I mean, you can go look back at the horror stories from FEMA back 20 plus years ago in the New Orleans area after Hurricane Katrina affected that. the federal entity that is the Federal Emergency Management Agency has been under scrutiny many a times, and it's unfortunate that with all of that scrutiny, I think it's probably accurate to say maybe not a whole lot has changed up to this point.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it hasn't. In fact, it just sounds like things have progressively have gotten worse. We had Avery County Commissioner Dennis Aldridge, who was there, spoke at the hearing. He said their biggest obstacle moving forward is the lack of clarity and consistent guidance from FEMA. Every time they get close to the finish line, they keep changing the goalposts, is what he said. He says, they have all of that going on. He said their county budget's about $42 million, but debris removal has cost them $53 million. That's not been reimbursed. They've only been obligated by FEMA to pay about FEMA's only been obligated to pay about $705,000. And another $5 million is being held. And he said that constant shifts in federal guidance are stalling projects. There was so much more being discussed about how all the goalposts are being moved, more layers are being added. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, I think any project over $100,000 has to hit her desk first for her to sign off on it. There were also some requests back in February for hazard mitigation projects to either buy out houses, or if this is the federal government pays 75%, the states pay 25%. We heard at that hearing that none of those have been even responded to. They're just sitting there since February. So it's a big mess.
Well, it's a big mess, and we've heard the discussion at the national level from President Donald Trump about dismantling and getting rid of FEMA in its current form and essentially turning into a clearinghouse for check writing for local and state governments that need help after natural disasters like Hurricane Helene. Teresa, obviously the president has been in the Oval Office now going on a little over 9 months, and I assume some would have hoped that things wouldn't still be this bad at this point. But it probably just points to how huge the bureaucracy is and how hard it really is to dig down into these issues.
Oh, I would definitely agree with you. Yeah, it's just too much. What's the old saying? I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. If you hear that, run. I think it was Ronald Reagan that said that. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. So there, it seems like it according to President Trump, it may be better served to put this back into the states' hands, to have them take care of it, or even seeing, different organizations like Samaritan's Purse. We heard from Luther Harrison, who's the vice president of North American Ministries. They, aside from giving out supplies when the storm first hit, they've paid for over 50 families' mortgages, replaced over 200 vehicles, purchased mobile homes. They're rebuilding homes. They're furnishing homes. They've gone through so much. It's not just Samaritan's Purse. It was even the Amish from Pennsylvania who came down and helped. So you're wondering now, obviously, then not all of them can do that, but maybe even had Representative Brendan Jones say, you know what? Maybe we should take a look at seeing if maybe we can get more of these kind of groups to get these houses and get the things up and running a lot faster than we're getting the funding from the federal government. It seems they're dragging their feet. And, it might be a good idea, maybe not for everything, but, look what they've done, which is so remarkable.
We'll continue the conversation with Teresa Opeka coming up after this. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:30, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will get another look at the roadways on your early Friday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning.
It's 5:37. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Some social media drama ongoing between California Governor Gavin Newsom and North Carolina Senate Leader Phil Berger. Gavin Newsom posted and reposted a story yesterday on his X account indicating that Phil Berger, the leader of the North Carolina Senate, was set to get an endorsement from President Donald Trump in his primary run coming up early next year in exchange for redrawing North Carolina congressional maps. That post was sent out by Gavin Newsom around 3:40 yesterday afternoon with the headline, quote, "Donald Trump is swapping endorsements in exchange for rigging elections, and it barely makes the news." I'll note to the California governor's point, he literally posted a news story, so hard to argue it's not making the news. Nevertheless, Senate Leader Phil Berger clapped back on that on his X account saying, quote, "I've been watching what's going on in California with Gavin Newsom trying to steal the Republican majority in Congress. We have drawn 4 congressional maps in the last 6 years in redistricting fights with Democrats because of their Sutil Blue strategy. If we have to draw one more map this year, we will. That said, I've never spoken to President Donald Trump about this or an endorsement. The Democrats are spreading lies to hurt President Trump." So a little back and forth social media activity between the leader of the North Carolina Senate and California Governor Gavin Newsom with, potential now discussions and talks about redrawing the 1st congressional district, which is really the only true swing district in North Carolina. The state has 14 congressional districts in total. The other 13 are drawn in a way that either favors Republicans or Democrats. The 1st congressional district, in which Democrat Don Davis currently serves, is one that is essentially a toss-up district. So we'll wait and see. Before the end of this year, candidate filing for the midterm elections will be in early December. So district maps, if they are to be redrawn, I'm not saying necessarily that they are, but if they are set to be redrawn, that will have to happen within the next couple of months. We'll continue to track that progress right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:39, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Continue our coverage of what has been a busy week in the North Carolina General Assembly, a government oversight committee hearing looking at Hurricane Helene response and recovery across the western half of our state. Well, and Teresa, let's go back almost a year ago to the immediate aftermath of the storm. There was very heavy criticism on the Cooper administration and other elected officials across western North Carolina for what was being described as a lackluster, slow response. And we saw these groups like Samaritan's Purse and others. We had the Cajun Navy coming up from Louisiana, all swarming into western North Carolina to provide food, supplies, internet access through Starlink, Elon Musk making that available for free for folks in western North Carolina in the immediate aftermath. We've got a relatively recent track record of how these local entities seem to just be a whole lot more efficient than either a local, state, or federal government.
Absolutely. And it's no difference as the last few hearings. I've covered these for a couple of years now when they went back to NCORE. Now we're focusing on Hurricane Helene with Grow NC. That's the Governor Stein's new office for Helene recovery. We had Representative Jones basically lambasting former Governor Cooper, at that hearing, basically saying, this is on him. His response goes all the way back to Matthew and Florence and Helene, and it's just like, what are you doing? He put the blame onto him, a family stranded still to this day in motels and hotels, trailers. Even the General Assembly came up with a Cooper Accountability Act. He said, we're giving, Governor Stein and Grow and See a notice to do a much better job than the Cooper administration did. And I like what he said at the end. He says, to families of Western North Carolina, you're not forgotten. General Assembly is going to stay in the fight, and he will not let another Hurricane Cooper under his watch. He stressfully said that. So, yeah, I mean, just what a track record that the state even has when helping out hurricane victims. It's not a good one. So these private entities helping out have been a humongous help.
Teresa, you mentioned at the beginning, of course, the human toll and tragedy of this. More than 100 people in western North Carolina losing their lives from this storm. An absolute tragedy there. But then we focus on the economic side of it. Helene, and these estimations are still very fluid, and they could change. But as we sit here this morning, $60 billion in damage. That is almost an inconceivable amount of money from just one storm.
Yeah, you can't wrap your head around it. I mean, a billion. I mean, it seems what a billion, a million, or it's 60 billion. It's just amazing. And like you said, it's fluid. I imagine that that number is going to change, maybe in the coming year or so. You might see it go up. So we did hear from officials too that the state was approved, or residents rather were approved for about 517 million in FEMA assistance. But the state's only received a little over 10% in federal funding to cover the damage from the storm after requesting about 48%. And normally states receive about 40 to 50%. Hurricane Helene has been the fifth costliest of any hurricane since 2005. So that's remarkable in itself as well. And to know that, the state really hasn't gotten a lot of federal funding, which is just not great.
Unfortunately, some of the funding has come in from the General Assembly. They have passed a variety of either mini budgets or bills specifically allocating money for Hurricane Helene, billions of dollars. Fortunately, Teresa, out of the state's rainy day fund and other funding programs that are available in North Carolina. And obviously, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Families still need to be back in their homes. But as our coverage has continued over the last couple of weeks, businesses are reopening. Tourism is heading back out to the western half of North Carolina. There is still some good progress that has gone.
Yes, most definitely. You've got the roads opened up as well. And I believe it's Mount Mitchell that reopened. All the state parks over in western North Carolina have reopened for recreation. And now we're talking about fall, with seeing the leaf peeping and all of that. So yeah, it's a great time, as you say, to go out and support those businesses, support those people trying to put food on the table, pay their mortgages and their bills, all of their families, go out and support them. And as they say, western North Carolina is definitely open for business. So that is a good thing that has come out of all of this.
Wrapping up on the federal discussion inside of this, we saw that the governor was in Washington, D.C. last week. Photos posted on his social media indicated that he met with both of our United States senators, Ted Budd and Tom Tillis, a very lengthy meeting with the congressional delegation as well in the House of Representatives. I'm assuming that those meetings went well, Teresa, and hopefully some more pressure from state officials like Governor Stein can get some more of this money flowing out of the feds.
Yes, and that's what they've all been saying. Even General Assembly said yesterday, or at that hearing, rather, that they said they were definitely keeping the pressure on the congressional contingent from North Carolina to get those funds because they are so desperately needed. So yeah, I'm hoping that the meeting did go well, and hopefully we see more federal dollars flowing in and less red tape for people to deal with here in North Carolina.
Teresa, we've got some additional quotes from this meeting, including some of the video clips that you talked about from this lengthy committee meeting that happened in the General Assembly. Where can folks go and find those details this morning?
Sure. They can head on over to carolinajournal.com.
We appreciate the update. Teresa Opeka from carolinajournal.com joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 546, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will get another look at traffic on your Friday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good front.
Good morning again. It's 5:53. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT as we hit the 1-year mark. It was Friday, September the 27th, 2024. Carolina Journal News Hour was just a couple of weeks old when we were tracking Hurricane Helene. The center of that storm crossed the South Carolina border around 8 a.m. back on the 27th of September last year, bringing unimaginable widespread destruction to portions of upstate South Carolina and western North Carolina. Flooding, landslides, and hurricane-force winds caused an unimaginable amount of destruction, more particularly here in the western half of our state. One of the reasons that the destruction was as bad as it was due to the fact that heavy rain had already fallen across western North Carolina in the days before the storm, another low pressure system in the area causing some moderate rainfall, nothing that should in itself have been too remarkable, but you add that on top of 20, 25, 30 inches of rain from Hurricane Helene, the ground became absolutely so saturated that the tree roots really didn't have anything to hold on to, which caused so many trees to falling through homes and businesses in the western half of the state. Hurricane Helene was the deadliest Atlantic hurricane since Maria in 2017 and is the deadliest to strike the United States mainland since Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. And the numbers, they are very somber. The National Hurricane Center reports 107 deaths in the state of North Carolina from Helene, 86 directly from the storm, 21 indirectly from things like medical emergencies in the immediate aftermath. And the damage, it was widespread and it was everywhere. Homes, businesses, hospitals, schools. It was absolutely remarkable. Landslides and historic flooding completely washed away roads, highways. Interstate 40 literally fell into a gorge. Bridges and even the electrical infrastructure, cell phones, water treatment plants, and wastewater treatment systems, in some cases, literally washed off the map. Helene now ranks as the fifth costliest Atlantic hurricane on record, behind Katrina, Harvey, Ian, and Maria, those storms affecting both portions of Florida and Texas. The North Carolina impact is estimated to be around $60 billion. Buncombe County, which hosts the city of Asheville, was hit especially hard by the storm, and because Asheville is such a major U.S. city and many folks even not from North Carolina have either visited or have heard of the Asheville area, there was a lot of a national spotlight on Buncombe County and Asheville. Flash flooding, river flooding, and landslides killed the dozens of people in and around Buncombe County. 16 died in landslides around the Fairview area, and in Swannanoa and Black Mountain, 9 drowned in raging floodwaters from the Swannanoa River as it took absolutely no mercy on anything in its path. More than 500 water rescues took place just in Buncombe County alone as historic river flooding devastated the low-lying areas around Asheville. The Biltmore Village was submerged or in some cases completely swept away. The very popular River Arts District was largely destroyed, and flooding also struck Bernardsville along the Ivy River and areas near the Broad River in the southeastern portion of the county. In total, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of landslides in western North Carolina, which only added to the amount of devastation and destruction. Tens of thousands of trees were knocked down, many crashing onto homes, causing even more destruction from that storm. And some of these rainfall totals, even looking back 1 year ago, remarkable. In Yancey County, 30.78 inches of rain. Transylvania County, 29.9 inches of rain as well there, as in the days prior to that, seeing 5-6 inches of rain from a different low pressure system. It is remarkable to look back on what a year it has been across western North Carolina. We'll have continued coverage of the 1 year mark of Hurricane Helene over on our website, carolinajournal.com. That's going to do it for a Friday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you Monday morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.